Welcome back, everyone, to the Deep Dive. Today we're tackling a question for the ages. How do you tell a visionary from a con artist in a world where charisma and controversy, well, they seem to go hand in hand?
Yeah, this is the question that's become even more relevant now, I think, in the age of social media influencers,
Mhm.
where personal branding and self-promotion can sometimes overshadow actual, genuine activism.
Exactly. And that's where we're taking a deep dive today into the life and career of Hasan Piker,
Mm.
better known as HasanAbi online. You sent over a ton of articles, analyses, even some forum discussions on him. It seems like he's someone you've been following pretty closely.
Yeah, definitely a fascinating case study. He's built this massive following on Twitch and other platforms, raising millions of dollars for charity. He's engaged with political figures like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and sparked fierce debates on like everything from U.S. foreign policy to internet culture wars.
So is he genuinely changing the world? Or is this just a fame game for personal gain? Is he grifter or is he gifted?
Yeah.
Let's start unpacking this by looking at his background.
Okay, so right off the bat, his upbringing is anything but ordinary. Born in New Jersey, but raised in Istanbul, Turkey. He brings this really unique cross-cultural perspective to his commentary.
And he double majored in political science and communication studies at Rutgers University.
Mhm.
Talk about a perfectly tailored resume for the world of online political commentary. But how much do you think his upbringing actually influences his political views? Is it a source of genuine authenticity or just a carefully crafted part of his online persona?
Ooh, that's a tough one. It's certainly possible that experiencing different cultures and political systems firsthand shaped his worldview, but it's also possible that he's strategically leveraging his background to appeal to a wider audience, presenting himself as this, worldly, insightful figure.
So maybe a bit of both. It's like he's saying, hey, I've seen things from both sides, so you can trust me to give you the real deal.
Exactly. And that kind of framing can be very persuasive, especially for a younger audience that might be disillusioned with traditional news sources.
Okay, so let's shift gears and talk about his career trajectory. He started out at the Young Turks, a progressive news network. He hosted shows like The Breakdown and even contributed to HuffPost. Pretty traditional media background, right?
Absolutely. But then in 2020, he makes this seemingly abrupt shift to Twitch, focusing primarily on political commentary and reaction content.
And that's where things really explode for him. He becomes one of the most watched streamers on the platform, amassing this huge, dedicated following. Makes you wonder, was this a calculated move? Recognizing the declining influence of traditional media and jumping ship to where the eyeballs were moving? Or was it just being in the right place at the right time, riding the wave of online trends?
It's definitely a question worth considering. Did he see the writing on the wall for traditional media and strategically pivot to a platform where he could have more control, more freedom, and potentially more influence?
Right. And the speed at which he rose to fame on Twitch is mind-boggling. It speaks to his savvy and understanding of the platform's dynamics.
Yeah. He quickly mastered the art of blending education, entertainment, and inspiration. He took these complex political topics and made them accessible and relatable, especially for a younger audience that might be turned off by dry academic discussions.
Yeah, he doesn't shy away from using humor and impactful commentary, creating this fast-paced, engaging experience. It's almost like watching a political talk show, but on steroids.
Yeah.
And he didn't stop at Twitch, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram. He's everywhere.
Which is interesting, right? He's clearly not just creating content, he's building a brand. Meticulously cultivating an online persona across multiple platforms, each catering to a slightly different audience and format.
So is this multi-platform strategy a sign of genuine dedication to reaching as many people as possible with his message? Or is it a cynical ploy to maximize profit by feeding the algorithms and playing the engagement game?
That's where the line between genuine activism and calculated self-promotion gets blurry. It's a question that we'll need to keep in mind as we continue to explore his career and delve deeper into his political views.
And those political views are definitely, well, let's just say he doesn't shy away from expressing them.
That's one way to put it. He's made it pretty clear where he stands on the political spectrum, identifying as a progressive leftist and a socialist.
Yeah, he's all in on progressive values, advocating for universal health care, LGBTQ plus rights, gun control. And he doesn't hold back on his criticism of politicians and policies he disagrees with.
And this is where things start to get interesting in terms of the whole grifter or gifted question, because that willingness to take a stand, even if it's unpopular, can be seen as both admirable and calculated.
Okay, I see where you're going with this. On one hand, it could be a sign of genuine conviction, a refusal to compromise his principles for the sake of popularity. But on the other hand,
It could also be a way to cultivate a loyal following, solidify his image as a fearless truth teller, and ultimately increase his influence and earning potential.
Right. It's like he's playing both sides of the coin. He gets to be the righteous crusader fighting for the little guy while also reaping the rewards of that image.
Exactly. And his early advocacy against Turkish President Erdogan seems to fit into this pattern. Remember that article you sent over detailing his criticism of Erdogan's authoritarian policies and his support for Turkish dissidents?
Yeah, that was back when he was still with the Young Turks. It seemed pretty genuine at the time. But now I'm wondering, is this a consistent pattern of standing up for the underdog? Or is it just a convenient narrative that he's crafted for himself?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it's a question that becomes even more complicated when we start looking at some of the controversies he's been involved in.
Oh yeah, the controversy. He's had his fair share of those.
Yeah.
Let's start with the one that got him banned from Twitch for saying America deserved 9/11 during a reaction to comments by Dan Crenshaw.
Oh, yeah. That was a major turning point in his career. And it really put him on the map for better or worse. Because on one hand, you could argue that he was recklessly seeking attention, pushing the boundaries of acceptable speech just to go viral.
But on the other hand,
He could have genuinely believed he was making a valid point about U.S. foreign policy, even if it was clumsily phrased and deeply offensive to many.
that's where the line between provocative commentary and harmful rhetoric gets blurry. And it's up to each individual to decide whether they believe he crossed that line.
Exactly. And it's a question that comes up again and again when you look at his comments defending Hezbollah and the Houthis, both designated terrorist organizations by the U.S.
Yeah, he frames their actions as resistance against Israel, which further complicates the issue. Because while you can argue for the right to criticize Israeli policies, is it okay to defend groups that engage in violence?
It's a slippery slope, isn't it? And it's one that he seems to navigate with a mix of conviction and calculated ambiguity.
Right, he's walking this tightrope between advocating for Palestinian rights and potentially alienating viewers who see those groups as terrorists. It makes you wonder, is he truly committed to peace and justice, or is he just playing both sides to maximize his appeal?
That's a question that's really hard to answer definitively. But it's worth noting that this incident, along with others, has led to accusations of anti-Semitism, with critics arguing that he's promoting hatred towards Jewish people.
He denies those accusations, of course, claiming that criticism of Israeli policies is not the same as hating Jewish people. But it's a highly sensitive and emotionally charged issue, and his rhetoric has undeniably alienated some viewers.
And it raises questions about the responsibility of online influencers who wade into complex geopolitical conflicts. Are they contributing to a more nuanced understanding, or are they simply amplifying existing tensions and prejudices?
That's a great point, because for all his talk about progressive values and fighting for the underdog, some of his actions seem to contradict those ideals.
And that brings us to another major controversy, his feud with fellow streamer Aiden Ross. Remember you mentioned how this feud got pretty ugly with accusations of copyright violations and even legal threats?
Yeah, it was a whole mess. They were constantly clashing over everything from political views to personal conduct.
Well, this feud is interesting because it reveals how Hasan uses conflict to maintain relevance, even if it means resorting to personal attacks and potentially silencing dissenting voices.
I see what you mean. It kind of reinforces the grifter narrative, like he's more interested in winning the argument and maintaining his dominance than in having a productive dialogue.
Exactly, and it plays into this larger pattern of him lashing out at critics, using his platform to shut down opposing viewpoints, and engaging in behavior that seems at odds with his self-proclaimed commitment to open discourse.
So maybe he's not as open-minded and tolerant as he portrays himself to be.
That's a possibility worth considering, and it's something we'll need to keep in mind as we move on to discuss his approach to political commentary and his role in the world of Twitch politics.
Okay, let's dive into that next, because he's definitely a major force in shaping online political discourse, particularly among younger audiences. So we've talked about how HasanAbi is this powerful voice in online political discourse, but his methods and motivations are definitely still up for debate.
Yeah, for sure. You know, he's been praised for bringing attention to important social and political issues, mobilizing a massive online community, and inspiring tons of people to get involved in activism.
And we can't forget about all that fundraising he's done for charities. He's raised millions for organizations supporting Palestinians, humanitarian aid, disaster relief.
His contributions are amazing. It's hard to argue with the positive impact he's had in those areas, but it's also worth considering the context of those actions.
So you mean, like, are they purely altruistic, or is there an element of self-preservation involved? Like, is he trying to offset some of the more controversial things he's said or done?
Exactly. It's a classic tactic for someone trying to manage their public image. You know, like, hey, look at all the good I'm doing. Don't pay attention to the things I said that upset you.
And then there's the whole wealth paradox. He's living the high life in a multi-million-dollar West Hollywood mansion while talking about socialist ideals.
Oh.
Kind of jarring, isn't it?
It definitely raises questions about authenticity. Critics argue that he's benefiting from the very system he criticizes, profiting off of capitalism while condemning its excesses.
Yeah, it's hard to reconcile those two things.
Yeah.
And it makes you wonder, is he truly committed to systemic change, or is he just playing a role that benefits him personally?
He has acknowledged this tension, though. He argues that he's using his wealth to support progressive causes and amplify marginalized voices. But whether that's enough to absolve him in the eyes of his critics is debatable.
It's a tough one. And it kind of speaks to the larger issue of how we evaluate online influencers. Are we holding them to the same standards as traditional public figures, or are we giving them a pass because they operate in this less formal, more chaotic online space?
That's the key question, and it's especially relevant when we consider Hasan's approach to political commentary. He's been criticized for relying a lot on what he calls library actions, basically using pre-recorded clips and reactions to comment on news.
Yeah, you sent over an article that talked about this. Some people argue that it's kind of a shallow substitute for actual in-depth analysis.
Exactly. It feeds into the idea that he's more interested in entertainment and engagement than actually providing nuanced, well-researched commentary.
And there's that incident where he admitted to breaking a story based on unconfirmed reports just because it aligned with his pre-existing beliefs.
Yikes. That's a major red flag for anyone who values journalistic integrity. It raises serious concerns about his commitment to accuracy and objectivity.
So are we getting informed, entertained, and inspired by his content? Or are we being manipulated by a skilled performer who knows how to play the algorithm and capitalize on outrage?
That's the million-dollar question, and it's one that each viewer has to answer for themselves.
So after taking this deep dive, what's the verdict? Visionary or a con artist? Grifter or gifted?
Honestly, it's hard to say for sure. He's a complex figure with a mix of admirable qualities and concerning behaviors.
Yeah, he's raised millions for charity and brought attention to important issues. But he's also courted controversy and made statements that have alienated a lot of people.
He's a master of online engagement, but his methods often lack substance and raise ethical concerns.
It seems like he really embodies both the potential and the pitfalls of online influence.
I think that's a fair assessment. He's definitely a product of the digital age, a master of navigating the attention economy and exploiting the algorithms that drive online engagement. Whether that's ultimately a force for good or for ill remains to be seen.
One thing's for sure, though, he's not going anywhere anytime soon. His influence just keeps growing, and he's a major force in shaping political discourse, for better or worse.
So as you continue to follow his career, keep these questions in mind. Is he using his platform to promote positive change, or is he just in it for himself?
Is he a visionary leader or a master manipulator?
Only time will tell.
And that's what makes the deep dive so interesting. We're exploring these complex figures and trying to make sense of their impact on the world. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of HasanAbi.
Until next time, stay curious.